affirmer clairement le leadership du gouvernement canadien. C'est le gouvernement canadien qui a la compétence et la responsabilité en matière de frontières. La deuxième chose à laquelle on s'attend aussi, c'est la collaboration et l'appui des provinces, dont l'appui du gouvernement québécois pour mettre en place ces mesures. Oui, c'est le gouvernement canadien qui est responsable avec la GRC et l'Agence de la sécurité frontalière de la plupart des mesures à la frontière, mais on sait déjà avec M. Bonnardel et ce que M. Legault a dit au cours des dernières semaines qu'ils vont être là pour appuyer, en fonction de leur capacité, les efforts du gouvernement.
Mais est-ce que vous allez faire des investissements qui vont être présentés, des possibilités d'investissement?
Oui, M. Leblanc est déjà très clair là-dessus.
Sur les investissements qui vont être présentés, qu'est-ce que vous espérez comme réaction du Conseil de la Fédération?
On va attendre que la rencontre ait lieu. M. Trudeau est déjà prêt. M. Leblanc a fait déjà beaucoup de travail. À l'interne, on est prêt aussi. Ça fait plusieurs semaines qu'on y travaille. Du côté de l'approvisionnement, on sait qu'on va devoir accélérer certains contrats. Donc, le plan est prêt et M. Trudeau va le présenter au premier ministre cet après-midi.
Avec des signes de dollars.
Et on verra comment ça va se passer. M. Trudeau est le maître de son agenda, évidemment. Et moi, je m'attends à une réaction positive des premiers ministres des provinces et des territoires parce qu'on fait tous partie de la même équipe Canada.
Est-ce que ça représente l'embauche de musulmans dans les universités, le rapport
C'est un comité totalement indépendant. Ils ont le droit de faire les rapports et les recommandations qu'ils souhaitent. Et deux, bien, au Québec, les universités sont indépendantes certainement du gouvernement canadien. Moi, je les connais très bien. Elles ont toujours été très compétentes dans la façon dont elles prenaient leurs décisions d'embauche et on va les laisser faire le travail qu'elles ont besoin de faire.
Philosophiquement, êtes-vous d'accord avec cette idée de dire qu'on devrait avoir des ratios, quoi?
Bien, un, c'est une recommandation d'un comité indépendant et deux, au Québec, on a des universités qui sont très solides et qui sont capables de prendre les bonnes décisions pour elles-mêmes.
Is there government
The Prime Minister is going to have a meeting with them, and it is to work as Team Canada in the best interest of Canadians and Canadians.
Should the border plan?
Apparently weaponizing visas. You can't get a visa if you're an Indian, want to go visit your family in India, without signing forms and that you support a strong India and you're not a Khalistani. I know it's...
I saw the same report you did, David.
Did you? I don't know. You have some thoughts about that?
Yeah, I just don't think it's right.
Yeah.
People should be able to go home to their home country if they want, and they shouldn't have any conditions imposed upon by the source country's government. It's simple as that.
Also, the government of Russia this morning, I don't know if you saw this, has warned its citizens it's unsafe for its citizens to come to Canada. I wonder if you have some thoughts about this warning from Russia.
I highly doubt that's accurate.
Est-ce que vous allez faire partie de cette rencontre avec les premiers ministres?
No. Are you worried that having announced the $250?
Do you think Canada risks being seen as caving into Trump?
I don't think there's any caving in. We have a partnership, we have an allyship, and we'll continue to be good friends and make sure that we have both security on both sides.
Will there be
India is weaponizing visas. India is weaponizing visas. I don't know if you've heard it from any of your constituents, but people who would like to travel to India are being told to sign forms before they get visas. They're being essentially threatened.
Every country has the right to determine who enters their country. Canada has its right to determine who enters their country, our country, and they have their right. We'll continue to have a relationship with India, and we'll continue to negotiate on any problematic areas.
Mr. Oliphant, on the
Before the
plan...
Affairs Committee vote to tell this government to immediately recognize a Palestinian state, what's in the report?
We're in camera, thanks. And the report is still the report is still confidential.
Qu'est-ce que vous attendez de la rencontre entre le premier ministre ce soir et les premiers ministres des provinces sur la frontière? Qu'est-ce qui doit se passer ce soir? C'est le moment de présenter le plan frontière?
Bien, je pense que c'est le moment de continuer à se parler. Je pense pas qu'il va y avoir un plan officiel tout détaillé. Je sais pas, je pense qu'il faut qu'ils continuent à se parler.
Et vous pensez pas qu'il y a en presse pour présenter ça?
Je pense que tous les jours, ça presse, mais en même temps, il n'y aura pas de plan final, ça continue à évoluer. Je pense qu'il y a une possibilité d'avoir des conversations avec nos collègues. Merci.
Well, I think there has to be a message discipline, a bit of a Team Canada approach. I think everybody has to buy into a common goal and strategy. I think there has to be a good discussion as to what that strategy should look like. they should all be part of it, but you got to get buy-in.
Est-ce que c'est le moment pour le gouvernement Trudeau de présenter son plan à la frontière, to present its border plan?
Oui.
Oui?
Bien sûr, ça c'est quelque chose qui est demandé par le gouvernement américain. Ça c'est quelque chose qui mérite une discussion avec le Premier ministre de toutes les provinces. Ils doivent être partie de la solution et leur point de vue est absolument pertinent.
But aren't you caving to Trump's demands? Are you just caving to Trump's demands by doing that?
I don't look to it that way. We have to act in the interest of Canadians, and whether it looks like we're caving to his demands is completely irrelevant. If his demands are aligned with the best interests of Canada, the perception of the relationship doesn't matter.
But if they're aligned with the interest of Canada, why didn't you guys act earlier then? Because you're saying, it's in Canada's interest.
The interests of Canada are to avoid crippling tariffs.
So it's in reaction to.
Of course, yeah. I mean, this would cause a recession worse than COVID.
What are you hearing from constituents about the $250 check proposal? Do they want to see it expanded?
It's a mixed message. Those who aren't getting it want to see it expanded. Many who are getting it are happy to be so, but there are some that say, I don't need it. So it's all over the place, quite frankly.
Are you worried after announcing it that the government won't be able to deliver it because there doesn't seem to be an opposition partner for it?
Not overly. If we're not able to deliver it, it's the opposition parties that are going to wear it.
Are you satisfied right now with how the government is dealing with Donald Trump?
You know what? He's so erratic. He's such a wild card. Yes, I am. You got to stay measured. You can't freak out at every turn. I think that's the right way to do it. It's still very, very early days, but I think the reasoned approach that the Prime Minister has been taking is the one most likely to bear fruit. Yeah. Okay.
Right. There will not be an Indigenous do you think it's important that the Cabinet, as it always has during this Prime Minister Trudeau's time, have an Indigenous person?
Absolutely.
You might have a vacancy in southwestern Ontario. Have you indicated, put your hand up?
No. I'm busy with a lot of other things right now. Between supply chains and Great Lakes and transport, I'm quite busy. So, no, but you're right. There should be somebody that's Indigenous on Cabinet.
Okay, that's all they want.
Have a great day.
Can I ask what you're hearing about the $250 check proposal from constituents?
What am I hearing?
Yeah.
I'm actually not hearing much. Not my riding. Not here in Ottawa. Just, what we're looking at right now is what's in the best interest of Canadians. And of course, the affordability issue is a big one. What I'm personally concentrating on right now is our relationship with the Americans, with the U.S., especially as it relates to supply chains, capacity. We do have to take into consideration, too, with the carbon border mechanism that's being put in place by the EU. And of course, how that can work to our advantage with respect to our carbon pricing, and in some places throughout the world, how it can be a disadvantage because they don't have that in place. So what we're looking at right now is being very positive, very proactive with respect to ensuring our carbon pricing is in place. We're able to trade with European countries as well as others that are looking at that carbon mechanism as part of their economy, as well as working with the U.S. to see what we can do with them to ensure that we're all on the same page, so that our overall international trade performance is strengthened versus not.
Do you think it would hurt you politically, though, if having announced this proposal, you guys don't actually deliver it because you don't seem to have support from an opposition?
Well, I don't think anybody's saying whether we are or we're not. I think right now we're looking at it, we're listening, we're hearing, we're talking to Canadians with respect to the affordability issue, and we're going to respond accordingly.
Okay. Well,
all right?
I mean,
have a good day. Merry Christmas, everyone. Take care.
So, are you worried about a definition of anti-Palestinian racism that's being developed in committee and the implications that could have for Canada's recognition of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and those two definitions potentially not being congruent with one another?
I think we're alive to concerns, but I think what's really important is that Canadians understand we're trying to address the divisions and the hatred that we're seeing in Canadian society, and we're seeing a lot that's related to geopolitical conflicts on the other side of the world. That's why it's critical to address anti-Semitism, but it's also critical to address reprisals and backlash that we've seen against people that are Arab or Palestinian, including looking in more detail at the definition of anti-Palestinian racism.
How would you propose the federal government could work on cracking down protest encampments, which is what the anti-Semitism report is asking?
Sorry, cracking down
on protest encampments on university grounds. That's one of the recommendations from the anti-Semitism report. How do you think that could work?
Well, I think it's really important, and I've said this before, that what we're trying to do is ensure that people are able to express their views, but always within constitutional parameters. So freedom of expression includes political speech as the highest form of protected speech. We know that at university campuses, that's where people expand their horizons, expand their minds, and challenge norms. That's what everyone does during undergrad. But what's always critically important is that when there's an encampment situation or a protest that transgresses the law, if it violates laws that relate to nuisance or trespass, or there's property laws that are being violated, that the law being enforced against those individuals. And I think you saw that whole scenario teased out with what happened at the University of Toronto, and you found a ruling by the judge in that instance that reflected on that careful balance that always needs to be maintained.
What do you think of the hiring of plus de professeurs musulmans, en fait? Une des recommandations du rapport sur l'islamophobie, c'est qu'on embauche plus de professeurs musulmans, palestiniens et arabes.
Oui, donc je suis au courant de ce qui est arrivé par rapport des rapports au comité de la justice. Mon rôle, c'est pas de gérer le comité de justice, c'est de répondre à leurs recommandations. C'est ça qu'on va faire comme gouvernement, moi et Mme Kira, le ministre responsable aussi. Mais ce que je peux souligner, c'est juste en termes généraux, je crois que, soit comme parent, soit comme ministre, que c'est toujours efficace d'avoir une diversité en termes des enseignants et professeurs à n'importe quel niveau, en termes d'éduquer nos jeunes. C'est comme ça qu'ils peuvent avoir accès à plusieurs différentes perspectives. Ils peuvent les combattre, les perspectives, ou ils peuvent décider que les perspectives les attirent, like they are interested dans leurs perspectives. Mais je suis toujours à la défense d'une diversité parmi nos jeunes avec leur système d'éducation à n'importe quel niveau.
Juste pour finir là-dessus, mais que faites-vous de la liberté académique? Je comprends que vous êtes en faveur d'une diversité dans l'enseignement, mais que faites-vous de la liberté académique et de la compétence?
La liberté académique est extrêmement importante et je crois que c'est le même thème parce que la liberté académique souligne l'importance d'être possible de présenter n'importe quel point de vue au niveau universitaire ou au niveau secondaire, par exemple.
Mais c'est aussi la liberté d'embaucher qui ont...
Mais c'est certain que la décision d'embaucher quelqu'un, c'est une décision pour le conseil scolaire au niveau secondaire élémentaire et c'est une décision pour une université, c'est sûr. Ça, il faut toujours sauvegarder ça.
Are you hearing any concerns about the federal government adopting a definition of anti-Palestinian racism?
Well, we haven't adopted one. It's something that would have to be looked at. The IRA definition took 16 years to complete, and then this one would have to be looked at in that way. We'd have to understand why you would have this nationality and not other nationalities, right? If you're going to adopt anti-Palestinian racism, are you going to have anti-Israeli racism? Are you going to have anti-other country racism? And so it's something that would have to be looked at for an extended period of time. That's one committee's study. I was involved in the anti-Semitism study, which I'm very proud of, and the results I'm very proud of came out yesterday. That's a study that you might want to ask my colleagues on, because I didn't sit on that one.
Et monsieur, sur cette question d'embaucher peut-être plus de personnel enseignant musulman, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ça?
Mais toutes les écoles, toutes les universités partout dans le pays sont différentes. Vous ne pourriez pas dire qu'il y a une lacune à chaque université dans le pays. Quant à moi, c'est une question pour les universités. On ne devrait pas engager du monde parce qu'ils sont une religion ou une autre. Je ne suis pas d'accord avec ça et je n'étais pas sur le comité pour cette recommandation, mais je n'ai pas...
Mais pourquoi vos collègues sont derrière ça?
Does the federal government move forward with criminalizing these student protests, these encampments on universities?
There's no need. The encampments, as we recommended in the report, are a violation of student policy. They're a violation of the codes of conduct in every university in this country, and universities need to not allow them because they're a violation of their codes of conduct. The recommendation in the anti-Semitism report was uniformly enforcing your code of conduct, which includes you're not allowed to have encampments, which includes you can't have hateful speech on campus. Those are in the rules of every university in the country.
But should the criminal code be changed to make it more clear.
So but the recommendation for us in the criminal code was to create bubble legislation to say that you can't block access to or exit from places of worship, schools, or community buildings. That you shouldn't be able to use your freedom of speech to block somebody else's freedom of speech. That is an important recommendation for the federal government in the report.
How do you expect the Justice Minister to respond?
I hope that he will respond positively to the anti-Semitism report that was largely agreed to by all of the parties, even the conservative dissent said they agreed with the vast majority of recommendations in the report. They just didn't agree with the diversity, equity, inclusion one.
Le rapport sur l'islamophobie, on dit il faut faire la...
Moi, je n'étais pas là pour ce rapport-là.
Juste voir si vous avez quelque chose à dire. Il y a cette idée de faire la distinction entre se sentir pas en sécurité et juste être mal à l'aise. Est-ce que vous voyez ça comme une critique envers peut-être les communautés juives par rapport au campus? Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ça?
Mais j'ai vu ça dans la lettre de le Special Envoy quand elle a écrit aux universités. Et pour moi, c'est pas correct qu'un étudiant ne se sente pas sécure sur les campus. C'est clair qu'il y aura des débats profonds sur tous les différents sujets sur le campus, mais de dire que celui-là n'a pas le droit de se sentir sécure. Et c'était clair de le témoignage des étudiants juifs qui ne se sentaient pas sécures.
Alors pour vous, c'est ça, c'est une attaque contre les juifs qui disent « moi, je me sens pas bien » et donc c'est insécurisant. Pour vous, ils essaient de s'attaquer à ça.
Moi, je ne catégorise pas la raison pour laquelle c'était écrit, mais quant à moi, c'est clair que vous devriez avoir liberté de discours et c'est clair que les étudiants doivent avoir le droit de sécurité.
Est-ce que vous sentez que le gouvernement du Québec s'acharne
la proposition de M. Legault d'interdire la prière en public en disposition de dérogation, machin, vous en pensez quoi, vous?
Donc, pour moi, j'ai parlé à quelques amis dans le gouvernement Legault et qu'est-ce que j'ai dit? C'est que je suis contre l'utilisation de la clause dérogatoire. Je suis contre une interdiction complète des prières publiques parce que c'est-à-dire que vous ne pourriez pas avoir un Mass Park qui est là chaque été dans mon comté. Vous ne pourriez pas faire des bénédictions quand vous allumez le sapin de Noël ou le Hanoukia à l'extérieur de l'hôtel de ville. Mais je comprends le problème, c'est qu'il y a des blocages des rues. Et là, c'était illégal déjà de prier dans les rues et bloquer les rues. Et le problème, c'est que la police n'agit pas. La police de Montréal, comme M. Legault a dit, devrait agir.
Can I get a response in English?
Sorry?
Response in English, please?
Can the government what?
Oh, could I get a response in English?
Oh, on that one? Sure. I'm against the use of the notwithstanding clause. I've always been against the use of the notwithstanding clause. I'm against banning public prayer because I think the issue is I have masses in my parks in the summer. When you light the Christmas tree or light the menorah in front of City Hall, you're saying blessings. That's going far too far. What I've counseled my friends in the Legault government to do is to be prudent. The issue that they're talking about is blocking roads. It's already illegal to block roads under the highway code. The problem is police are not enforcing the law when these massive demonstrations are happening, making citizens in Montreal feel insecure, which is causing the reaction that they're getting, and that shouldn't happen.
What about a
the police should
scenario
act.
with the sermon from Adil Shirkawi shortly after October the 7th?
He should have been charged.
Calling for, but is that
He
not a
should have
form
been
of public
charged.
prayer? Was that not a public prayer that took place?
No. Whether it was a public prayer or not, he went into hate speech. Hate speech is always illegal. Prayer, most prayer is not hate speech, right? The vast majority of prayer, people aren't calling for hate. That went into hate speech, and I'm astounded that prosecutors didn't follow through and prosecute him.
Pensez-vous que le gouvernement du Québec s'acharne contre les musulmans? Ça a été dit que le gouvernement du Québec s'acharnait contre les musulmans. Est-ce que vous pensez ça, vous aussi?
Moi, je ne prends pas. C'est pas à moi de voir la raison pour laquelle M. Legault a dit quelque chose. Pour moi, il réagit à les gens qui se sentent insécures à Montréal parce que les gens bloquent les rues. Et la police n'agit pas, et la police devrait agir à Montréal, et on n'a pas besoin d'une nouvelle loi pour faire ça parce que c'est déjà illégal.
Mais la question, c'est êtes-vous d'accord avec les propos de M. Miller qui a dit
J'étais pas là avec les propos de M. Miller.
Vous les
Pour moi,
avez entendus.
je vais parler de l'enjeu. L'enjeu, c'est qu'il y a un problème si les gens bloquent les rues, mais on n'a pas besoin d'interdire la prière. I'm good. Thank you. Sorry.
Provinces and territories might say that the federal government would be infringing on their jurisdiction. So how would you propose Ottawa can work with them on that?
Well, I think, again, this report dealt with universities, which is provincial jurisdiction, and things that are in the provincial domain. We can help with money for stuff like that, but they are within provincial domain, and our recommendations are to the provincial governments and to universities in a lot of ways. I'm not suggesting any penalties. I'm suggesting there's places in the report where we talk about where we could give money to help the provinces, to help the universities deal with certain things. Thanks,
Juste pour un autre sujet avant de terminer, le congé de TPS, le chèque de 250 $, qu'est-ce que vous entendez dans votre circonscription? Vous êtes dans une circonscription qui est quand même assez favorisée socio-économiquement.
Il y a pas, honnêtement, je dois vous dire, c'est pas le topic numéro 1 de la conversation dans mon circonscription. J'entends très peu des gens sur ça.
Ah oui?
À ce point-ci, oui. Mais quand, à cet égard, qu'est-ce que j'entends beaucoup, c'est les manifestations dans les rues de Montréal et le sens d'insécurité. Ça, c'est vraiment l'enjeu numéro 1 maintenant. Merci, Mélanie. Merci.
Can I ask you about the Islamophobia report?
I was not involved.
But you sit on the committee, though.
I said I subbed out for other members too.
You were never there?
I was there for a meeting.
So what do you think about the idea of increasing the hiring of Muslim teachers?
Well, I think that's up to provinces to decide on that.
But that's a recommendation.
That's a recommendation. That's what the committee decided. For me, that's up to provinces. I think in terms of education broadly, like as with politicians, as with any profession, that our profession should reflect the communities they represent. So whether that's politicians or teachers, but ultimately those education, especially with respect to teachers, is provincial.
So you're saying the community of teachers should reflect more the diversity of the Canadian population?
Every profession should reflect more on the diversity of the population, whether it's lawyers, politicians,
but should there
or
be
teachers.
hiring rules? That's the question.
I think there should be reflection. I don't think there can be laws or rules with respect to that, but ultimately our professions need to reflect, and whether it's reporters and journalists or politicians, lawyers, teachers, should reflect the community.
And what about cracking down on protesting cabinets? That's what the antisemitism report is recommending. What do you think of that?
Well, here's the thing. Like we lived through a 3-week convoy in this place, and I know there's a lot of groups that say, well, that protest reflects me, and it may be nonviolent, but it's not peaceful. So I think that's something we need to reflect on across the board with respect to whether, regardless of what the protest looks like, and we have to reflect on if individuals are at risk, which if you talk to students on campus who are Jewish, feel at risk in these places, is something we need to reflect on more as society.
We shouldn't ask about religious identity, so why then ask about religious identity that increase the ratio of Muslim teachers? Like, it seems like a contradiction there.
I haven't read that. I need to read it before I give
How would you know if
comments.
someone is Muslim?
I'm sorry?
How would you know if someone is Muslim?
What do you mean?
If you see a professor, how would anyone know if this person is Muslim or any other religion?
Symbolically, I think it's only female are visible with the hijab, and male side, I don't know. Like how can you tell who's Muslim, Christian, or other? Yes, Sikhs are symbolically you can see because of the turban. You can tell.
So you think the report of the Justice Committee would be, the spirit of it would be to have more visible minority, people who have visible religious symbols should be.
I think it started with that teacher was being fired from school because of her hijab, or.
So the Bank of Canada's decision is good news for Canada and Canadians, especially for homeowners and businesses. Canada is leading the G7 in achieving a soft landing. Our economic plan is working. La décision du Banque du Canada ce matin est une bonne nouvelle pour le Canada, pour les Canadiens et Canadiennes, surtout pour les petites et moyennes entreprises, surtout pour les propriétaires de maisons. Notre plan économique fonctionne. Le Canada aura un atterrissage douce et le leader du G7 ont cette question.
Vous attendez un déblocage du Parlement d'ici la fin de l'année ou on va recommencer janvier dans la même situation?
Moi, j'espère que les partis d'opposition voient que c'est pas quelque chose de productif et qu'on devrait débloquer le Parlement, mais est-ce que j'ai de l'espoir que ça va arriver? Pas vraiment à ce moment, mais j'essaie toujours de travailler avec eux, de voir des manières où on pourrait collaborer. Comme on sait toujours, le directif du président du Chambre était de l'envoyer cet enjeu au comité. Alors, c'est vraiment les conservateurs qui font le blocage et jouent des jeux, mais quand même, on devrait, j'essaie toujours.
Mais où en sont les démarches pour tenter, un déblocage, par exemple, de faire adopter un baillon avec le NPD? Ils semblent quand même des alliés naturels pour vous, le NPD. Leur avez-vous présenté, leur avez-vous dit, appuyez-nous pour le baillon?
Je ne vais pas parler des négociations en public, mais je peux dire que je travaille avec tous les partis pour voir comment on pourrait arriver à un déblocage.
Est-ce que le chèque de 250 est encore dans les plans du gouvernement? Est-ce que ce serait possible d'ici la fin de l'année, mais même après? Est-ce que vous pensez peut-être même de scraper le projet?
Il y a des opportunités et des chemins qu'on pourrait prendre et c'est quelque chose que nous sommes toujours en train de penser et de voir les manières de comment...
Est-ce que vous espérez que ça soit dans la mise à jour économique à ce point-ci?
Moi, je ne commente pas sur la mise à jour économique. Ça, c'est quelque chose qu'on va présenter le lundi et j'ai hâte de voir, comme tous les Canadiens, qu'est-ce qui va être dans cette...
Are you worried about not being able to deliver the $250 check proposal if you can't get an opposition party to support it after having announced it's coming to Canadians and people maybe having spent it in their brains?
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, we're in a minority parliament, so obviously we need to work with an opposition party, at least one of them, to pass any legislation in this place. Last night was a great day. We got the the estimates passed, which means that, funding for important programs like the National School Food Program, like dental care, like additional support for the Canadian Armed Forces, as well as, funding for Indigenous communities and housing was passed. And at the end of the day, we had the support of a couple of opposition parties in that regard. So, we're obviously working and negotiating and talking with all of the parties at all times, and that's what a minority government is.
Madame Wood, c'est l'augmentation de la taxe sur le gain de capital. Ça va être quoi votre plan pour faire adopter cette mesure-là? Parce qu'en ce moment, on ne voit pas de plan.
On est toujours en discussion pour voir comment on pourrait avancer les importants projets de loi dans la Chambre. Bien sûr, les conservateurs sont en train de bloquer les autres travaux du Parlement. Alors maintenant, c'est à nous tous, les partis de cette Chambre, de voir comment on pourrait avancer les mesures importantes pour les Canadiens.
Prime Minister, that Kamala Harris's loss was a setback for women.
Look, we've got to do everything that we can collectively, every party, every level of government, to support each other, and particularly women and minorities who want to get involved in politics. And I, for one, am really, really proud of the Liberal Party's track record on that. Tell a short story. Back in 2015, I went down to Australia after voting to train for the Rio Olympics. And when it was announced that Canada had the world's first gender-balanced cabinet, I was emotional because I didn't realize that hadn't been the case around the world. It takes leadership. And people who think that, Canada's just kind of small on the world stage, maybe a bit insignificant, President Biden did the same thing. And he did it because he said Canada led the way and set a good example. So whatever we can do to support each other and make sure that that room, the House of Commons, is more representative of Canada and society, the better.
Are you worried that Kamala Harris has lost constituents about the $250 check proposal?
Well, we've been knocking on a lot of doors lately and walking around at various Christmas markets and everything, and getting a lot of great feedback from Canadians. They're really excited about the GST holiday, and one of the reasons for that is because, I chatted with a lot of restaurant owners on the weekend because Main Street's got a lot of restaurants in Milton, and they know that January is a tough time for restaurants. This is a time where we need to stimulate our economy, and people want to, get back together with friends, see their family, and a 13% break at a restaurant bill is going to make a big difference.
Do you think the federal government, Canada, is ready for a female federal leader? Because right now we just have males, middle-aged men. Do you think Canada would be actually ready to vote in a female
leader at this time?
I know that my partner, Emily, is you know, she's basically will vote for anybody who's not male at this point. I mean, it's a, you know, just a personal anecdote. Sorry. But look, like, I strongly believe that a parliament that more closely resembles society in Canada, which is 50-50 in terms of gender and very, very diverse in terms of background, doesn't mean just like cultural background, but where you come from, what your views are, you know, how you got your start is really, really important.
What do you want to see out of the premier's?
Oops, sorry.
Now the NDP says you still have now arrived.
Yeah, well, it seems like the NDP feels the same way. I mean, if we've got the money, sure. You want to give a financial break to seniors and to handicapped people as well. So yeah, we would like to do that, but again, it's a matter of do we have the money to do it.
So your reflection is still at the same point as a couple of weeks ago?
Pretty well, but we still have no dance partners. We're dancing by ourselves.
From BC cabinet, is it going to be important to you that there's another someone from BC in the cabinet?
I think it's always important for BC to have a strong voice in cabinet. We've got great strong voices right now in our ministers.
Should it be another woman from BC?
That's a decision for the Prime Minister to make, but I think for all of us in BC caucus, it's important to have good, powerful, strong voices. We've got those right now. I'm confident the Prime Minister will always have good voices from BC.
Can I ask you as well about an investigation our team has done with some of the Sikh community in Surrey, that the Indian government is using visas, it's sort of they're weaponizing visas. You don't get a visa unless you sign a form saying, you know, you support a strong
I can't comment on that, but what I will say is I think it's really important for Canadians to feel safe in this country and to make sure that they're able to operate without having to worry about any foreign interference from anyone.
Great, thank you. Hey, David. Hey, how you doing? What do you think about potentially having to face Alan McMaster at the next election?
Well, I mean, Adam has to win a nomination of his own. I know Alan well, and it'll be a spirited campaign. But he's a credible, good guy. But I look forward to it. If I'm running in that riding, I don't know yet. The party has to decide on where I'm going where. So it could be Sidney Glace-Bay or it could be the other riding.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
To ask you about a story we had on the news last night. Apparently, if Canadians who want to visit family in India are being told by the Indian consulate they have to sign forms. So India's kind of weaponizing their visas. I just wondered, have you heard much about that?
Just what I heard in the news. I'm going to have to look into it.
Are there people who are scared about traveling to India in your riding?
I haven't really heard it in my riding. Again, I'd have to look into what's going on. I did see the news story, but I do think that's problematic. I think we'd have to look into. I know that there's studies going on. Excuse me, in the committees, there's studies going on right now. So I think that's something that I would raise actually.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll catch her on QP if you've got something else.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
What about the premiers? Not really. Well, how about the border? What do you need to tell them to be sure?
Well, I think that's a message that will be given by the Prime Minister today, and
what will that
you'll have to wait for that. Honestly, like it's the Prime Minister's place to speak about Team Canada and how we have to have a common front with our most important economic trading partner and the ones that we have the close relations to. So. I think that you'll have to wait for.
Aren't you worried it looks like we're capitulating to Donald Trump's demands on the border?
Not at all. I mean, I think what we're doing is acting in our national interest. I think that has to be the focus. So I'm here to serve Canadians. I'm not here to serve Americans. But we do have some common interests, and that is making sure that the border is safe and secure. I have measures that I need to take within my own department to make sure that we are doing a number of things to ensure that we are making sure that the integrity of our visa process is respected, that people that are entitled to that come to this country actually do so in a way that's fair to the rest of the people that are here, and measures that are important in strengthening our partnerships with the U.S. We expect the same from them, and it's a two-way street. Like sometimes that gets lost in the narrative, that it is a two-way street. We expect the U.S. to do a number of things in the border that directly impact us.
When you come back in the wintertime, Donald Trump will be president. He will go from inauguration. Are you ready for 4 years of talking about Donald Trump's
well, that's a good point.
And missives?
It's a good point because this is the first inning. And yeah, sure, there's some goofy stuff going on, there's some shenanigans, but we have to be serious about this. Canadians expect our government to be serious about the border, about making sure Canadians are safe and secure. We'll continue to do that. The Prime Minister has demonstrated in the past. He has to continue to demonstrate that. I think that's the message that he'll send to premiers. We can't be arguing against ourselves and at cross purposes. I think that's really important. And I think this is because anything the U.S. does impacts Canada so severely, this isn't a time for partisanship.
I got to ask you a separate subject.
Sure, Chris.
Forgive me. Undocumented refugees, undocumented workers. I understand that you've said in the past that you would like to see undocumented refugees put into the regular system. It would make humanitarian and economic sense. Just wondering why the government hasn't proceeded with that.
There's no consensus at this time as to what to do, Chris. There is irregular migration in Canada. This has been the case for decades. People that have been here without status, that in name only are not Canadian. I think there's a place for them in the society. That doesn't apply to everyone that's here irregularly, particularly recent arrivals. A number of people that are violating the terms of the visas that were accorded to them and they undertook to return, need to return to their own countries. We have methods of ensuring that, the federal government, when people refuse to do so. We've seen significant numbers of deportation, I think historic highs of the numbers of removals from this country this year. We're very serious about that. Again, there is a place, and I wanted to have a regularization program that made sense. Unable to build that consensus, and I, first and foremost, am responsible to Canadians to make sure that I'm listening to them, and so this isn't the time to do that, particularly pressure that any sort of large program would have on being able to implement it, particularly the pressure that we put on the public service to get things done. Just now isn't the time for it.
I remember in the late 90s covering people who were seeking refuge in churches and temples and so on. Has politics moved past that period where, you know, Sansumia was hiding out the Unitarian Church in Ottawa West to avoid deportation? And there were all these individual cases across the country.
Yeah, and look, I think largely as a country we have been very, very welcoming to people that are seeking to escape war and oppression. We've seen that with some of the programs that we put into place with respect to Syrian refugees in particular. We're welcoming Ukrainians on a temporary basis and the hundreds of thousands, Afghan refugees. But those policies and things that we put into place like that have an impact on our ability to be able to serve them properly, to serve Canadians properly, and that's just reality. So I think there will always be heartbreaking situations, and I think we have to make sure that we keep our hearts open to Canadians and to people that expect us to be able to keep people here if they're truly seeking refuge from war and oppression. At the same time, we have to avoid succumbing to the pleas of people that are gaming the system, and I think that is immensely frustrating to Canadians when they see that happening. And it's part of having a rigorous immigration system that is living up to our principles as Canadians, but also one that is not naive to the realities of folks that are gaming the system. Thanks.
Yep. On the Premier's meeting, with Trudeau.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it will, show the Team Canada focus, and I think working together, we'll be able to deliver some strong messaging, and we'll find out how each provinces are feeling through that process and what we need to discuss to bring to the table as we move forward on with the U.S.
Canada Post?
Well, it's challenging. Many kids are not getting their letters for Santa.
We've had from some of the senators suggesting having DHS expand where it can sort of patrol within 15 kilometers of the border. Is that something we should maybe mirror here with CBSA, maybe expanding where they can operate to sort of intercept sort of auto thefts, drugs kind of thing? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's more of an appropriate question for the minister, but when we look at the bigger picture, we're looking at everything. We're looking at everything right now with our American partners, and of course, not only to do what we've been doing, but to expand on that and make sure that our borders are safer.
Perfect.
All right. Have a
Any
good
thoughts
day.
on the Premier's meeting?
No thoughts yet. Once again, a more appropriate question for the Prime Minister, and we're looking for some good news at the end of the day with respect to his meeting. A lot of that having to do with our relationship with the U.S. and how we're going to proceed.
All right, thanks very much.
All right, have a good day.
A challenge that is Donald Trump, but that we also need to stand up for ourselves.
Do you think that we'll have a united front after this meeting?
I don't know. I hope that we will, because, united we stand, divided we fall.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
So the report is calling for the recognition of anti-Palestinian discrimination as its own form of hate. That's obviously something you're interested in as well. And we heard your Liberal colleague Anthony Housefather today say that that's a bad idea because you can't single out forms of hate against every single nation or ethnicity. Where do you stop? Where do you start with that? What's your response?
So anti-Palestinian racism is distinct, it's deep, it's systemic. Okay, and I did 7 roundtables during the summer. I traveled across Canada, starting from Scarborough to Vancouver. We did one in Scarborough, one in Mississauga, one in London, one in Canada, Ottawa, Montreal, Calgary, and Vancouver. And we heard it very clearly. The testimonies, like I'm very thankful to 300 people who shared their lived experiences with us in those roundtables. And it is really very important for the Government of Canada to recognize anti-Palestinian racism, define it, and make sure to take action. We cannot, it's distinct, and yet all Palestinians are not Muslims. So it exists within federal services, it exists at all hospitals, we heard it very clearly from the healthcare sector, from the teachers, from academia, from the people sharing their lived experiences. It didn't start on October 7th, it exists before that too. So it has to be recognized, and Prime Minister has committed to Amira that it will be done, and my report, I have submitted that report, and I will release that report public on January 29th.
Sorry, something just really quick on similar. On the ombudsperson's report for hate crimes, they called for the separate classification of hate crimes under the criminal code. That's part of the online harm law. Are you worried that won't be able to get passed before the next election, just given how delayed everything is right now?
I have done a lot of work on anti-Palestinian racism, and that really needs to be recognized, defined, and APR is really very important. What all the Palestinian people are going through. This is about the identity. The parents talked about that they are telling their kids not to disclose in schools that they are Palestinian. The people are it's about losing their identity. So it's really very important that no one in this country, which we have all called, I'm an immigrant myself, I really don't want that my kids have to hide their identity. Anyone asks them who they are, they say, we are Canadian Muslims of Pakistani origin. And that's their identity which has to be protected. So why the Palestinian parents have to tell their kids that not to disclose in the school that they are Palestinian? That's not something which we want in this country. So we have to make sure that everyone's identity is, we are there to fight for that and to protect that. As a mother, I think it's really very important for me to make sure that kids can tell with pride who they are from where they are.
Just on the idea of hiring more Muslim or Palestinian professors, there's also a recommendation in the Islamophobia report.
Yes.
Some might argue that you'd be infringing on university jurisdiction, on provincial, territorial jurisdiction. We've already heard that in the How do you go about
See, it's really very important that, especially in the teaching spaces, those young people see in those positions they who they are, because having a diversity at the universities, at the colleges, at the school level will give assurance to the students, and it will be about more diversity, more tolerance, because see, all these young people need to see that they are being represented at all levels.
Right, but the federal government does not have jurisdiction over education, so how do you recommend the federal government get involved in that?
I think universities should do the effort to make sure that there is diversity on the faculties and everything, because it's very important for the young people to see role models. So it's for that. Thank you.